Hello, my name is Brian Kalinoski, and this is my project presentation for Dr. Sprankles' History 213 class. My project topic is on the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings were two super important events that not only ended World War II, but also started the atomic era. In this presentation, I'm going to focus mainly on three things: why the US chose to drop the bombs, whether Japan was already close to surrender, and how these events shaped the early Cold War. The bombings didn't just end the fighting, they completely changed global politics. The nuclear weapons were symbols of both power and fear. My topic directly connects to our course topics of World War II, Cold War, and communism. My thesis for this project is the United States justified the atomic bombs as a way to quickly end World War II and save lives, but the decision was also meant to intimidate the Soviet Union and create post-war dominance, making the bombings both a military and political strategy that shaped the start of the Cold War. Around mid-1945, Japan was still refusing to surrender, even after losing nearly all of its navy, most of its air force, and most of its industry due to months of US air raids. The food shortages and widespread destruction from the bombs left the country on the edge of collapse. And inside Japan's government, some of the leaders were trying to quietly end the war, but in the end, their military refused to accept surrender. At the same time, some Japanese leaders were reaching out to the Soviet Union, hoping that Moscow could help negotiate peace and protect them. But what they didn't know was that the Soviets had already promised to join the war against Japan in August, essentially stopping any real chance of that plan succeeding. When the Soviets prepared to invade from the north and the US forces advanced from the south, Japan's defeat was inevitable. Japanese leaders faced a choice between national destruction or surrender. Even before the atomic bombs were dropped, Japan was in a really tough spot, and its government was running out of time and options. After Truman learned the atomic bomb test was a success, he saw it as the fastest way to end the war and avoid a massive invasion of Japan. The military estimated there could have been over 300,000 Allied casualties if they had to end up invading. In Truman's July 25th diary entry, he called the bomb the most terrible bomb in the history of the world, and wrote that it should only target military objectives and soldiers and sailors, not women and children. That just shows that he was thinking about the moral side of the decision as well as focusing on ending the war quickly. Truman also knew the weapon wasn't just powerful, he knew it was going to make history. He knew that using it would show the world that the US was the new global leader in both science and military strength. So when he approved the bomb drops, it wasn't only to end the war quickly, but also just to cement us as the new top power. While Truman was still considering his options, the Interim Committee, which was a small group of his top military and political advisors, they met to propose how the new bomb should be used. After discussing it, they recommended that the bomb be dropped without any warning. Their goal was to shock Japan into surrendering and also to demonstrate America's new weapon before the Soviets could expand their influence into Asia. Their goal was to end the war quickly and save Allied lives while also showing the US's scientific and military dominance. In the end, their recommendation led Truman to drop the bomb without any warning. It wasn't just about ending the war quickly, it was about sending a message of strength and to show the US as the new dominant global power. After the war, US leaders defended using the atomic bomb by calling it a military necessity, something that they believed saved countless lives by ending the war quickly. The Secretary of War at the time, Henry Stinson, later called the bomb the least abhorrent choice, basically claiming that every other option, like an invasion or more blockades, would have led to more deaths compared to the bombings. That phrase, the least abhorrent choice, really shows their mindset back in 1945. The people making the decision to drop the bombs weren't aiming for mass destruction, they were trying to prevent something substantially worse. To them it wasn't just using a bomb out of cruelty, it was about ending the chaos of World War II. The same reasoning carried into the Cold War. The US believed that peace could only be maintained as long as we had the superior nuclear power, and this belief is what shaped a lot of if not all, the Cold War. We just kept producing new weapons and trying to stay on top. By August 1945, Japan's situation was hopeless. After the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, plus the Soviet Union's entry into the war, the Japanese government finally decided there was just no way to win. Emperor Hirohito released a surrender broadcast where he talked about the bomb, saying, "A new and most cruel bomb," saying that continuing the war would lead to the total extinction of human civilization. That statement just shows how much the atomic attack shocked Japan and its leaders. Um, Before this happened, I mentioned that Japan tried to negotiate peace through the Soviet Union, hoping to secure some better terms, but Moscow had already agreed at Yalta to declare war on Japan. Once the Soviets invaded Manchuria and the atomic bombs were dropped, Japan had no hope of winning. On August 15th, 1945, Hirohito released Japan's official surrender announcement. His decision changed their stance from fighting for honor to fighting for survival, and officially marked the end of World War II. On August 6, 1945, a U.S. plane named the Enola Gay dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Instantly, about 80,000 people were killed, and nearly 90% of the city was destroyed. The explosion destroyed everything within miles and continued to kill thousands of people later from burns and radiation poisoning. Just 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, killing about 40,000 people instantly, and a lot more people later from their injuries. Truman announced the bomb as a harnessing of the basic power of the universe, describing it as a scientific achievement and a necessary step forward to end the war. In just a few days, both cities were completely destroyed. The bombings brought World War II to a sudden end and introduced the world to the age of atomic warfare. After the bombings, the reactions were mixed across the world. President Truman said the bomb shortened the agony of war, claiming that it ended the fighting faster and saved countless American lives. But in Japan, the bombings were remembered as a national tragedy. Survivors described the destruction as something beyond human imagination and a humanitarian tragedy. The bombing shocked other countries as well. Some governments and scientists saw it as proof of progress, while others saw it as start of an era of fear. The bombings didn't just end World War II, it forced the world to think about how the bombings affected power and survival going into the Cold War. When World War II ended, the atomic bomb completely changed how the global power worked. The U.S. was the only country with nuclear weapons from 1945 to 49, and that monopoly essentially instantly gave us major influence over world politics. That led the Soviets to try and catch up to us by developing their own weapon and starting an arms race that essentially started the Cold War. One of my sources, authors, David Holloway, said at the beginning, the nuclear age began before the Cold War, basically meaning that fear and rivalry started the moment the first bomb was dropped. The bombings on Hiroshima and Nagasaki warned the Soviets about US's power, and it changed their focus from warfare to nuclear development. They had to keep the peace by showing you could destroy your enemy if you needed. So even though the bombs ended World War II, they also started decades of competition, anxiety, and distrust between the US and Soviet Union. Viewpoints and debates. After the war, debate immediately started on whether the atomic bomb was truly necessary. U.S. leaders such as the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, defended it as a military necessity that saved lives. That's essentially how most American officials viewed it at the time, as a harsh but necessary decision to end the war quickly. Japanese leaders, though, they saw it completely different. Another one of my source authors, Asada, argued that Japan's surrender wasn't only from the bombs, but also because the Soviet Union was entering the war and their situation was already dire. Survivors in Japan focused more on the human side, like the radiation and the suffering and the moral costs, and these different perspectives just show how differently people remember history. Americans remember the bomb as saving lives, while Japanese citizens remember it as absolutely destroying them. Both views are technically true in their own way, but that tension keeps the debate alive even today. New interpretations. Right after 1945, the common American view was that the bomb ended the war quickly and saved countless U.S. soldier lives. But later on, researchers started looking a little deeper, and as I mentioned, one of my source authors, Asada, argues that Japan's surrender was due to the combination of the bombings and the Soviet Union's entry into the war, not just the bombings alone. Another one of my source authors, Holloway, explains that how after the war, the bomb became a symbol of U.S. power, and it shaped the early Cold War politics. Another one of my authors, Marvin Peace, says that the bomb might not have even been needed, and that Japan had already been trying to find a diplomatic way to surrender before Hiroshima happened. There are a lot of different viewpoints, but essentially the early story was that the bomb ended the war quickly, and now current interpretations see it more as the moment where the world entered the nuclear age, an age built on fear, competition, instead of peace. Lessons learned. The atomic bombings officially ended World War II, which immediately stopped the fighting and forced Japan to surrender. Unfortunately, the victory started the new issue, the Cold War, and it was the start of the nuclear age and the global arms race. Within just a few years, the United States and the Soviet Union were one-upping each other with deadlier and deadlier weapons due to the fear of mutual destruction. The long-term effects were way worse than anybody expected. The radiation poisoned the air, and survivors faced lifelong health effects from the bombings. The psychological fear alone spread throughout the world, and that's where you see some people building doomsday bunkers under their house. People started realizing that modern science could destroy humanity just as easily as it could help save it. Even today, there's still tons of debates on whether using the bomb was justified and the ethics of using nuclear weapons at all. In conclusion, the United States used the atomic bomb to end the war fast, avoid casualties with the invasion, and to show the world its new power. Japan was already collapsing, but refused to surrender until the bombs and the Soviet Union's entry into the war left them absolutely no other option. The decision to drop the bombs didn't just end World War II, it began the Cold War era. My source author, Holloway, explains that it marked the moment one war ended and another began. The Cold War defined by nuclear deterrence. And basically, the bomb became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of control, fear, and global competition. Even today, the decision continues to influence how many nations think about security, morality, and power. The memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is a good reminder that one decision can have a larger impact than expected. In this case, the bombings not only ended the war, but they changed the entire direction of human history. And then here are my citations that I used to do this, and here are my image citations that I used in the slide. Thank you.